Sometimes the person who saves you is the one nobody sees. Tonight, in a rain-battered Portland restaurant, a billionaire is about to walk away from another hollow connection until a trembling voice stops him mid-step. What happens next will shatter everything. Both of them thought they knew about trust, worth, and second chances. This is a story about the moment when two broken people choose honesty over safety and discover that the rarest kind of strength looks nothing like confidence. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The rain hit Portland like it had a grudge. Not the romantic kind of rain you see in movies where drops shimmer under streetlights and make everything look softer. This was the Oregon kind. Relentless, cold, the type that soaked through your coat before you made it 10 feet from your car. It drummed against the windows of Oleander's, a small restaurant tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered bookstore on Morrison Street, turning the glass into rivers of distorted light. Inside, the warmth should have felt welcoming. Should have. But Adrian Vale sat at table 7 near the back corner, and warmth was the last thing he felt. Across from him, Victoria Chen smiled. Perfect teeth. Perfect posture. Perfect everything, really, if you measured perfection by a checklist. She wore a charcoal dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, and her makeup was the kind that looked effortless but took an hour. She'd ordered the salmon, not because she wanted it, Adrian suspected, but because it was the second most expensive thing on the menu. Ordering the most expensive would have been too obvious. "So," Victoria said, swirling her wine glass with practiced ease, "your daughter, Emma, right? She must be what, 7 now?" "8," Adrian said quietly. 8. God, they grow fast. She took a sip, her eyes flicking to his watch. A simple steel Rolex, nothing flashy, before returning to his face. "Does she go to Westridge? I heard that's where most of the families in your neighborhood send their kids." Adrian's jaw tightened, just slightly. "She goes to public school." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind her eyes. Recalculation. "Oh, that's refreshing. I mean, with everything going on in education these days, it's probably good for her to have a more diverse experience." Diverse experience. As if Emma's school was some kind of social experiment, instead of just the place down the street where his daughter had friends and a teacher who actually gave a damn. Adrian didn't respond. He reached for his water glass instead, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make Victoria uncomfortable. She filled it quickly, like she'd been trained to. "I actually think it's amazing," she continued, leaning forward slightly, "how you've managed to balance everything. Single parent, running Vale Dynamics, and still making time for—" She gestured vaguely at the table between them. This. As if the evening were some kind of charitable act on his part. Adrian had been here before. Not in this exact restaurant. Oleander's was new to him, but in this exact situation. Different woman, same script. The carefully crafted questions that sounded like curiosity but were actually auditions. The way they touched his arm at just the right moments. The subtle mentions of their own accomplishments, always framed as humility, but designed to prove they could fit into his world. He was tired of it. Tired of the performance, tired of the feeling that every conversation was being recorded and analyzed for future use. "What about you?" Adrian asked, mostly because it seemed like he should say something. "You mentioned you work in marketing?" "Brand strategy," Victoria corrected, her smile sharpening. "I just wrapped a campaign for Tessia Hotels. You know them, right? We repositioned their entire West Coast presence. It was intense, but so rewarding." She kept talking. Adrian kept nodding. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he was already planning his exit. Not rudely, he'd never been rude, not even when people deserved it, but cleanly. Finish the dinner. Thank her for her time. Suggest they stay in touch, knowing they wouldn't. Drive home, check on Emma. Pretend tomorrow would be different. And then he heard her. Not Victoria. The other voice. It came from somewhere behind him, soft and uncertain, almost swallowed by the ambient noise of the restaurant. But Adrian had learned over years of board meetings and negotiations to listen for the things people didn't want him to hear. And this voice, quiet as it was, carried something real in it. "Excuse me," the voice said. "Can I get you anything else?" Adrian glanced over his shoulder. The waitress stood a few feet away, her hands clasped in front of her apron. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and eyes that looked like they'd learned to stay down. She wasn't looking at Adrian. She was looking at Victoria, her expression carefully neutral, but Adrian caught something else there. Something watchful. "We're fine," Victoria said without looking up from her phone. She'd pulled it out mid-sentence, a move so smooth Adrian almost missed it. Almost. The waitress nodded and started to turn away, but then, "Actually," Victoria said, her tone bright and sharp, "could you bring the check? We're just about done here." It wasn't a question, it was a dismissal. Adrian saw the waitress's shoulders tense just slightly before she nodded again. "Of course, I'll bring that right over." She walked away, and Adrian watched her go. She moved like someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible, weaving between tables with her head down, her steps quick and efficient. She didn't look back. Victoria, meanwhile, had returned her attention to her phone, her thumbs moving across the screen with practiced speed. She wasn't even pretending to hide it anymore. Adrian leaned back in his chair, something cold settling in his chest. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Hmm?" Victoria glanced up, her smile automatic. "Oh yeah, sorry, just checking something." She turned the phone slightly, not enough for him to see the screen, but enough to make it clear she wasn't checking email. Adrian caught a glimpse of a browser window. An image. His name maybe, and a headline. He couldn't tell for sure, but he didn't need to. He'd seen this before too. "I should probably get going soon," Adrian said, his voice even. "I told Emma I'd be home by 9. Victoria blinked, and for just a second her mask slipped. Not much. Just enough to show the irritation underneath. "Oh, already?" "Early morning tomorrow." She recovered quickly, her smile sliding back into place. "Of course, I totally understand. You're such a dedicated dad." The words were right, the tone was right, but Adrian heard the subtext loud and clear. "You're leaving early. This isn't going well." "What did I do wrong?" "Nothing," he wanted to say. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't do anything real." The waitress returned with the check, setting it down on the edge of the table without a word. Victoria reached for it immediately, a reflex, but Adrian was faster. He slid his card into the fold before she could even open it. "I've got it," he said. Victoria hesitated, then smiled. "Thank you. That's very generous." Generous. As if paying for dinner were some kind of grand gesture instead of just basic decency. The waitress took the check and disappeared again, and Adrian found himself watching her retreat. There was something about the way she moved, hurried, but not frantic, purposeful. Like she had a system, a rhythm she'd built to get through the shift without drawing attention. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then typed something quickly before setting it down. "Sorry," she said again. "Work thing." Adrian didn't respond. He was done responding. The waitress came back with his card and the receipt, setting them down with a quiet, "Thank you for coming in." Her voice was softer than before, and when Adrian looked up, he caught her eyes for just a second. They were brown, deep and tired, and they didn't smile the way the rest of her face tried to. But there was something in them, something steady. "Thank you," Adrian said, and he meant it. She nodded and moved to the next table, and Adrian signed the receipt, adding a tip that was probably more than the meal itself. He stood, and Victoria stood with him, already reaching for her coat. "This was really nice," she said, her voice warm and practiced. "We should do it again sometime." Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing but angles and calculation. No malice, no cruelty. Just emptiness dressed up as charm. "Take care, Victoria," he said. Her smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. "Yeah," she said. "You too." Adrian walked toward the door, pulling his coat tighter against the rain he knew was waiting. He didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye to the waitress, though part of him wanted to. What would he even say? "Thanks for noticing what I noticed?" That sounded insane. He pushed through the door, and the rain hit him immediately, cold and sharp. He ducked his head and started toward his car, parked half a block down, and then he heard it again. "Excuse me." Adrian stopped, turned. The waitress stood in the doorway of the restaurant, one hand braced against the doorframe, like she might bolt back inside at any second. The rain was already soaking her sleeve, but she didn't seem to notice. "Yeah?" Adrian said. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Maybe? Her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear it over the rain. Maybe you should wait a little longer. Adrian stared at her. What? Her face flushed and she looked down, her hand tightening on the doorframe. I'm sorry, God, that was so inappropriate. I shouldn't have... No, Adrian said quickly. It's okay. What do you mean? She looked up, and for the first time, Adrian saw something other than caution in her expression. Something raw. I don't know, she said. I heard some of your conversation. Not on purpose. I wasn't trying to listen, but it's a small place, and... She trailed off, shaking her head. She doesn't see you. She's looking at something else. And I just thought, maybe you deserve better than that. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain exactly. Something closer to relief. Who are you? He asked. The waitress blinked, startled. I'm nobody. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. Please forget What's your name? She hesitated. Mira. Mira, Adrian repeated. He took a step closer, rain dripping off his coat. I'm Adrian. I know, she said, then immediately looked horrified. I mean, not because I was looking you up or anything. She just said your name earlier, and It's okay, Adrian said again, and something about the way he said it made her stop spiraling. Thank you for saying something. Mira looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. Then she nodded, just once, and stepped back into the restaurant. The door swung shut between them. Adrian stood there in the rain, staring at the closed door, feeling like something fundamental had just shifted beneath his feet. Inside, Mira pressed her back against the wall next to the host stand, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. What the hell had she just done? She'd spent 3 years perfecting the art of being invisible. 3 years keeping her head down, her voice quiet, her presence minimal. 3 years learning that the safest way to move through the world was to let it forget you existed. And then tonight, she'd thrown all of that away in one stupid, impulsive moment. Mira? She looked up. Carlos, the line cook, was leaning through the kitchen window, his expression somewhere between amused and concerned. You good? Yeah, Mira said automatically. I'm fine. Carlos raised an eyebrow. You just ran outside in the rain to talk to a customer. I didn't run. You power walked. Mira groaned and covered her face with her hands. I'm an idiot. What'd you say to him? Nothing. It doesn't matter. Carlos didn't push, which was one of the many reasons Mira liked him. He just shrugged and disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving her alone with her spiraling thoughts. She shouldn't have said anything. She definitely shouldn't have followed Adrian outside. What was she thinking? That he'd thank her? That he'd see her as some kind of wise truth-teller instead of a nosy waitress who'd overstepped about a dozen professional boundaries? Mira walked back to the server station and started rolling silverware, her hands moving on autopilot. She needed to focus, needed to get through the rest of her shift without doing anything else monumentally stupid. But she couldn't stop replaying the moment in her head. The way Adrian had looked at her, not through her, the way most customers did, but at her. Like she was a person instead of a function, and the way his expression had shifted when she'd spoken. Not anger, not irritation, relief, like he'd been waiting for someone to tell him the truth, and she'd accidentally been the one to do it. Mira shook her head and forced herself to focus on the silverware. It didn't matter, he'd go home. She'd finish her shift. Tomorrow, everything would go back to normal. Except 20 minutes later, when she went to clear table 7, she found something waiting for her. A business card, plain and expensive looking, tucked under the edge of Adrian's water glass. Mira picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. Adrian Vale, founder and CEO, Vale Dynamics. And below that, a phone number. Nothing else. No message, no explanation. Mira stared at it for a long time, her mind spinning. Then she walked to the host stand, opened the lost and found drawer, and placed the card inside. She closed the drawer. She went back to work. And she told herself, again, that trusting moments like this was how you ended up broken. Oh. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Adrian sat in his car, engine running, heat blasting, staring at the restaurant through the rain-streaked windshield. He should leave. Emma was waiting. He had emails to answer, calls to return, a presentation to review before tomorrow's board meeting. But he didn't move. Instead, he thought about the way Mira's voice had cracked when she'd said, "Maybe you deserve better than that." Like the words had cost her something to say. Like she'd been arguing with herself the whole time and barely won. Adrian pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He typed quickly. Follow up. Oleanders. Morrison Street. Mira. Then he put the phone down, shifted the car into drive, and pulled away from the curb. He didn't know what he was following up on exactly. Didn't know what he'd say if he came back. Didn't even know if Mira would want to see him again. But for the first time in months, maybe years, Adrian felt like he'd had a conversation that mattered, and he wasn't ready to let that go. Inside the restaurant, Mira finished her shift in a daze. She cleaned tables, refilled drinks, smiled at customers, and counted down the minutes until she could clock out. At 10:47 p.m., she finally did. She grabbed her coat from the back, said goodnight to Carlos, and stepped out into the rain. It had slowed to a drizzle, but the cold still bit through her jacket as she walked the 3 blocks to her apartment. The building was old and narrow, sandwiched between a tattoo parlor and a convenience store. Mira climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, unlocked her door, and stepped into the silence. Her apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it was hers, and it was safe, and that was all she needed. Mira dropped her keys on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. She should eat something, should shower, should do literally anything productive. Instead, she sat there in the dark, replaying the night over and over. The way Victoria had looked at Adrian like he was a portfolio instead of a person. The way Adrian had looked, tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like he'd been running on empty for so long he'd forgotten what full felt like. And the way he'd looked at Mira when she'd told him to wait, like she'd said something that mattered. Mira closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. She'd done the right thing, putting that card in the lost and found. She had. Because people like Adrian, successful, powerful, out-of-her-league people, didn't actually want honesty. They wanted the idea of honesty, the performance of it. And the second you gave them something real, they'd realize you weren't what they were looking for and disappear. She'd learned that the hard way. 3 years ago, Mira had been someone different, someone who took chances, someone who believed that hard work and hope could actually build a future. She'd been engaged. She'd been applying for real jobs, corporate jobs, the kind with benefits and career trajectories and everything her mother had told her to aim for. She'd made it to final interviews at 2 different companies. She'd been this close to something better. And then everything had fallen apart in the same week. The job offers evaporated, budget cuts, they said, though Mira suspected it was something else. The engagement ended, not with a fight, but with a quiet, devastating conversation where her fiancé had told her he didn't think they wanted the same things anymore. And Mira had realized, standing in the apartment they'd shared, that she didn't actually know what she wanted. She'd been so busy trying to become the person everyone expected her to be that she'd lost track of who she actually was. So she'd stopped trying. She'd taken the job at Oleander's because it was easy and undemanding and didn't require her to hope for anything. She'd moved into this tiny apartment because it was cheap and anonymous and didn't ask her to be anyone. And she'd learned to keep her head down, her voice quiet, and her expectations non-existent. It was safer that way. Mira opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. Adrian's card was still in the lost and found drawer. Someone would find it eventually. Some customer looking for a missing earring or a forgotten scarf. They'd see the name, maybe recognize it, maybe not. And eventually, it would get thrown away. And that would be that. Mira pulled a blanket over herself and let the silence settle around her like a second skin. Tomorrow, she'd wake up. She'd go to work. She'd smile at customers and refill drinks and pretend tonight had never happened. Because that's what she did. That's who she'd become. And it was fine. It was fine. Across town, Adrian let himself into his house as quietly as possible. The lights were off except for the one in the hallway, which meant Emma's nanny, Grace, had already put her to bed and gone home. Adrian set his keys down, shrugged off his coat, and climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. Emma's door was cracked open, and he pushed it wider, stepping into the room. She was asleep, Her dark hair spread across the pillow, one arm curled around a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. She looked peaceful, safe. Adrian stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe. This was why he kept going on those dinners, why he kept trying, even when it felt pointless. Because Emma deserved to see him try. Deserved to grow up knowing that her dad hadn't given up on the idea of building something real, even if it felt impossible. But tonight had been different. Tonight, he'd seen something, someone, who'd reminded him what real actually looked like. Adrian leaned down and kissed Emma's forehead, then slipped out of the room and closed the door behind him. He walked to his office, poured himself a drink he didn't really want, and sat down at his desk. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Thanks again for dinner. Let me know when you're free next." Adrian deleted it without responding. Then he opened his notes app and stared at the line he'd written earlier. Follow up. Oleanders. Morrison Street. Mira. He didn't know what following up would look like. Didn't know if Mira would even want to see him again. Hell, he didn't even know her last name. But he knew one thing. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at him and seen past the surface. Seen the exhaustion, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of someone trying to find something real in a world full of performances. And she'd cared enough to say something. Adrian closed the notes app and set his phone down. Tomorrow, he'd figure out what to do. Tonight, he'd just sit with the feeling of being seen and hope it wasn't the last time. 3 days passed before Adrian went back. He told himself it was coincidence. He had a meeting downtown that ran late, and Oleanders happened to be on the way home. Emma was at a sleepover, her first in months, something Grace had arranged with another family from school, so he had the evening free. It made sense to grab dinner somewhere quiet instead of heating up leftovers in an empty house. All of which was true. All of which was also carefully constructed bullshit, and Adrian knew it. He wanted to see her again. Wanted to know if that moment in the rain had been real or just some weird collision of timing and loneliness. Wanted to understand why a waitress he'd spoken to for less than a minute had stayed in his head longer than people he'd known for years. So on Thursday night, just after 7, Adrian pushed through the door of Oleanders and let the warmth hit him like a wall. The place looked different than it had on Monday. Busier, for one thing. Almost every table was full, and the noise level had jumped from library quiet to actual restaurant. A couple near the window was laughing about something. A family with 2 young kids occupied the big booth in the corner, the parents looking exhausted in that universal way parents of small children always did. Adrian scanned the room, trying not to look like he was scanning the room. And then he saw her. Mira was at the far end of the dining area, taking an order from an older couple. She had a notepad in one hand, pen poised, her expression politely attentive. She nodded at something the woman said, wrote it down, then asked a follow-up question Adrian couldn't hear from across the room. She looked exactly the same as she had 3 days ago. Same ponytail, same simple black shirt and apron, same careful way of holding herself, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. But Adrian noticed things he'd missed before. The way her shoulders relaxed slightly when the older couple smiled at her. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear with her free hand, a gesture so automatic she probably didn't even know she did it. The way her eyes flicked toward the kitchen every few seconds, like she was monitoring some internal timer. Just one tonight? Adrian turned. A hostess stood beside him, menus in hand, her smile professional and empty. "Yeah," Adrian said, "just me. Right this way." She led him to a table near the middle of the room, not the same table as Monday, but close enough that Adrian had a clear line of sight to where Mira was working. He sat down, accepted the menu, and pretended to read it while actually watching Mira finish up with the older couple. She laughed at something the man said, a real laugh, quick and surprised, and Adrian felt something tighten in his chest. It was such a small thing, such a normal thing, but it made her look younger somehow, less guarded. Then she glanced up, and her eyes landed on him. Adrian watched the recognition hit, watched her freeze mid-step, the notepad still in her hand, watched her expression shift through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds, surprise, confusion, something that might have been panic, before settling on carefully neutral. She looked away. Adrian waited. A minute passed, then 2. Mira delivered the older couple's order to the kitchen, picked up drinks for another table, checked on the family with kids. She moved efficiently, precisely, and didn't look in Adrian's direction once, avoiding him. Clearly. Adrian almost smiled. Almost. A different server approached his table. A younger guy with bleached hair and a name tag that read Tyler. "Hey man, what can I get you to drink?" "Just water," Adrian said. "And actually, is Mira working tonight?" Tyler blinked.
Yeah? Could she take my table? I mean, Tyler glanced toward the back of the restaurant where Mira had just disappeared into the kitchen. "She's pretty slammed right now. I can handle it if you want." "I'll wait," Adrian said. Tyler shrugged. "Your call." He left and Adrian sat back in his chair, the menu forgotten in front of him. 5 minutes later, Mira emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray loaded with plates. She delivered them to the family in the corner, handled some request about extra ketchup, and then, finally, turned toward Adrian's table. She walked over slowly, like she was approaching something dangerous. "Hi," she said when she reached him. Her voice was quiet, controlled. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I was in the area," Adrian said. "Right." She didn't believe him. He could see it in the slight tilt of her head, the way her fingers tightened around the edge of her notepad. "I wanted to thank you," Adrian continued, "for what you said the other night." Mira's expression didn't change. "You already thanked me." "I know, but I meant it." She looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian had the strangest feeling she was trying to figure out what he wanted, like she was used to people wanting things from her and had learned to identify the signs early. "Do you know what you want to order?" she asked finally. Adrian glanced down at the menu he hadn't actually read. "What do you recommend?" "The salmon's good. That's what my date ordered last time." Mira's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Almost. Then definitely don't get the salmon." Adrian did smile then. "Fair enough. How about the burger?" "Safe choice." "I'll take it." Mira wrote it down, her pen moving quickly across the notepad. "Anything to drink besides water?" "I'm good." She nodded and started to turn away, but Adrian spoke again before she could. "Can I ask you something?" Mira stopped, turned back. "Sure." "Why did you say something that night?" Her expression shuddered immediately. "I already told you. I thought you deserved better." "Yeah, but why did you care?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her fingers went to that strand of hair again, tucking it behind her ear, even though it was already tucked. "I don't know," she said finally. "I just did." It wasn't a real answer, and they both knew it. But Adrian didn't push. Instead, he just nodded. "Okay." Mira hesitated like she wanted to say something else. Then she just nodded back and walked away. Adrian watched her go, feeling like he'd just failed some kind of test he hadn't known he was taking. The burger arrived 20 minutes later, delivered by Tyler instead of Mira. It was good. Better than good, actually. But Adrian barely tasted it. He was too busy watching Mira work. She moved through the restaurant like she was choreographed, efficient, precise, never wasting a step. But there was something else, too. Something Adrian hadn't noticed the first night. She paid attention. Not in the fake, performative way servers sometimes did when they wanted a better tip. Really paid attention. She noticed when someone's water glass was getting low before they had to ask. Noticed when the family in the corner was getting restless and brought the kids' food out first. Noticed when the older couple from earlier seemed confused by the dessert menu and spent an extra minute explaining the options in a way that didn't make them feel stupid. It was subtle. So subtle most people probably didn't even register it. But Adrian saw it, and something clicked into place in his head. This wasn't just good customer service. This was empathy in action, the kind you couldn't train, the kind that came from actually giving a damn about the people around you. Adrian was still thinking about it when a commotion erupted near the front of the restaurant. "This is unacceptable." The voice was loud, sharp, cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. Adrian looked up and saw a man in an expensive suit standing near the host stand, his face red, his finger jabbing toward the hostess who'd seated Adrian earlier. "I specifically requested a quiet table," the man continued, his voice rising. "I made a reservation 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. And you seat us next to the kitchen?" The hostess looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm so sorry, sir. That's our best available table right now. If you'd like to wait, I can—" "Wait? I already waited. I had a reservation." "I understand, but do you?"
Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you don't understand anything. Adrian felt his jaw tighten. The man wasn't just angry. He was performing anger, making sure everyone in the restaurant knew he was unhappy, knew he was important, knew he had every right to make someone's night miserable over a table assignment. The hostess's hands were shaking. Sir, I really am sorry. Let me see if... I don't want to see anything. I want to speak to your manager. Of course, I'll get him right now. She started to turn, but before she could move, Mira appeared. She didn't rush, didn't run, just walked over from the other side of the dining room, her expression calm, her hands empty. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. The man turned on her immediately. No, everything is not okay. Your hostess here seems to think it's acceptable to ignore reservations and seat people wherever she feels like it. Mira looked at the hostess, who mouthed something Adrian couldn't catch. Then Mira turned back to the man, and her voice stayed quiet, even. I understand you're frustrated, she said. Reservations are important, and I'm sorry the seating isn't what you expected. Sorry doesn't fix the problem. You're right, it doesn't. Mira paused. Can I ask what would fix it? The man blinked, clearly not expecting the question. What? What would make this right for you? Mira asked. Because I want to make sure you have a good experience here. That matters to me. Something shifted in the man's expression. Not much, just enough. I want a quiet table, he said, his voice slightly less sharp. Away from the kitchen. That's what I requested. Okay. Mira glanced around the restaurant, her eyes scanning the tables. I have a four-top near the window that just cleared. It's quieter, and it has a better view. Would that work? The man hesitated. It's available now? It will be in about 2 minutes. I just need to clear and reset it. And you're sure it's quieter? I'm sure, Mira said. She smiled then, small, genuine. I wouldn't offer it if I wasn't. The man's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. Fine, that'll work. Great. Give me just a minute and I'll get you set up. She turned to the hostess and said something too quiet for Adrian to hear, then walked toward the window table and started clearing it herself. Plates, glasses, silverware, she moved quickly, loading everything onto a tray with practiced efficiency. Adrian watched the whole thing, something tightening in his chest. She'd just de-escalated a situation that could have turned into a full-blown scene. And she'd done it without groveling, without making excuses, without even breaking a sweat. She'd just listened, asked what the person needed, and then delivered. It was the kind of thing Adrian paid consultants 6 figures to teach his customer service teams, and most of them still couldn't do it half as well. The man and his date were seated at the new table 3 minutes later, and Mira handed them menus with the same quiet smile. Adrian couldn't hear what she said, but whatever it was, the man actually thanked her. Then Mira walked back toward the kitchen, and as she passed Adrian's table, he caught her eye. She stopped. That was impressive, Adrian said. Mira's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. It wasn't a big deal. It was. He was just frustrated. People get frustrated sometimes. Yeah, but most servers would have either let him blow up or gotten defensive. You did neither. Mira shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I just didn't want him to ruin everyone else's night. Still, Adrian said, that was good work. She looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian couldn't quite read her expression. Then she just nodded and walked away. Adrian sat there, his burger half-eaten and forgotten, his mind spinning. He'd come here tonight because he wanted to see Mira again, wanted to understand the moment they'd shared in the rain, but now he was seeing something else, something bigger. Mira wasn't just kind, she was capable, perceptive, the kind of person who could read a room, identify a problem, and solve it without making it about herself. And she was wasting that on a job that probably paid $12 an hour. Adrian pulled out his phone and opened a new note. He typed quickly, offer her something, don't push, just offer. Then he deleted it. Then he typed it again and saved it. He didn't know what he was offering yet, didn't know if she'd even want it. But he knew one thing, letting Mira disappear back into invisibility felt like a mistake he'd regret. The rest of the dinner passed quietly. Adrian finished his burger, declined dessert, and waited for the check. Mira brought it herself this time, setting it down on the edge of the table without meeting his eyes. Thanks, Adrian said. Of course. She started to turn away, but Adrian spoke again. Mira. She stopped. Can I ask you one more thing? She turned back, her expression guarded. Sure. Do you like working here? The question clearly surprised her. It's fine. It's a job. That's not what I asked. Mira's jaw tightened slightly. Why does it matter? It doesn't, Adrian said. I'm just curious. She looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian could see her trying to decide whether to answer honestly or give him the safe, scripted response. It's fine, she said finally. The people are nice, the work is steady. I'm not really looking for anything more than that. Why not? Because more is complicated, Mira said, and there was something sharp in her voice now, something defensive. And I'm not interested in complicated. Adrian nodded slowly. Fair enough. Mira waited, like she expected him to push back. When he didn't, she just picked up the check and walked away. Adrian left cash on the table, enough to cover the bill and another oversized tip, and stood to leave. As he walked toward the door, he passed the host stand where Mira was inputting something into the computer. She glanced up, and their eyes met for just a second. Good night, Adrian said. Good night, Mira replied. And then he was outside, the cold air hitting him like a slap, the city noise swallowing the quiet warmth of the restaurant. Adrian walked to his car, got in, and sat there for a minute with the engine off. He should let this go. Should accept that Mira didn't want whatever he was thinking about offering, should respect her boundaries and move on. But he couldn't shake the image of her calming that angry customer. Couldn't shake the feeling that she was capable of so much more than she was letting herself do. Adrian started the car and pulled into traffic, his mind already turning over possibilities. Inside the restaurant, Mira watched through the window as Adrian's car disappeared down the street. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the host stand and took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. He'd come back. Why had he come back? And why had he asked about her job? Mira knew what that question meant. She'd heard variations of it before. Do you like working here? Translation. You could do better. Translation. I'm about to offer you something. And she didn't want it. She didn't want the hope. Didn't want the possibility. Didn't want to start believing that maybe, just maybe, she could trust herself again. Because she'd been there before. 3 years ago, she'd believed. She'd let herself hope. And when it all fell apart, she'd spent months picking up pieces she wasn't sure she'd ever fully reassemble. So she'd learned to keep her head down, learned to expect nothing, learned that the safest way to live was to stop wanting more. And now, here was Adrian, looking at her like she mattered, like she was capable of something beyond refilling water glasses and diffusing drunk customers. It was terrifying. Hey, Mira looked up. Carlos was leaning through the kitchen window again, his expression knowing. He came back, Carlos said. Yeah. You gonna tell me what's going on? Nothing's going on. Carlos raised an eyebrow. Mira. I'm serious. He's just a customer. A customer who came back 3 days later and specifically requested your section. Tyler told you that? Tyler tells me everything, Carlos grinned. So what's the deal? Is he hitting on you? No, Mira said immediately. Then, less certainly, I don't think so. But you're not sure. I don't know what he wants. Carlos studied her for a moment, his expression softening. Maybe he doesn't want anything. Maybe he just likes talking to you. People don't just like talking to me. You'd be surprised. Mira shook her head and went back to the computer, pretending to focus on the screen. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation with Adrian. The way he'd watched her handle the angry customer. The way he'd asked if she liked her job, like the answer actually mattered to him. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense, and that scared her more than anything. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Mira cleared tables, took orders, smiled at customers, and counted down the minutes until closing. By the time she finally clocked out, it was almost 11, and her feet ached in that deep, bone-tired way that meant she'd been on them too long. She grabbed her coat, said goodnight to Carlos and Tyler, and stepped out into the cold. The streets were quiet. Portland at night had a strange, suspended quality, like the city was holding its breath between the noise of the day and the noise of tomorrow. Mira liked it, liked the way it felt like she had the world to herself, even if only for a few blocks. She was halfway home when her phone buzzed. Mira pulled it out, expecting a text from her landlord or maybe a notification from her bank. Instead, she saw a message from an unknown number. "This is Adrian. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I got your number from the restaurant." Mira stopped walking. "I wanted to say thank you again for what you did tonight. Watching you handle that situation reminded me why I started my company in the first place. If you're ever interested in talking about other opportunities, I'd love to buy you coffee. No pressure, just a conversation." Mira stared at the message, her heart pounding. He'd gotten her number from the restaurant, which meant he'd asked someone, probably Tyler, and Tyler had just given it to him, which was a whole other problem she'd have to deal with tomorrow. But right now, all she could focus on was the message itself. Other opportunities. There it was. The offer she'd known was coming. Mira's first instinct was to delete the message, block the number, pretend it had never happened. But she didn't. Instead, she stood there on the sidewalk, the cold seeping through her coat, and read the message again. No pressure, just a conversation. Except it wasn't just a conversation. It was a door. And Mira had spent 3 years learning to keep doors like that closed. She shoved the phone back in her pocket and started walking again, faster this time. By the time she reached her apartment, she'd almost convinced herself to ignore the message entirely. Almost. But when she finally collapsed onto her couch, still wearing her coat, she pulled out her phone and stared at Adrian's message for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. And then, before she could talk herself out of it, she typed, "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for anything right now. Thank you anyway." She hit send before she could second-guess it. The response came less than a minute later. "I understand. The offer stands if you ever change your mind." Mira set her phone down and closed her eyes. She'd done the right thing. She had. Keeping herself safe, keeping her life simple. That was smart. That was survival. So why did it feel like she'd just closed a door on something she couldn't quite name? Mira pulled the blanket over herself and tried to sleep, but all she could think about was the way Adrian had looked at her when she'd calmed that angry customer, like he'd seen something in her she'd forgotten was there. And for just a second, one reckless, dangerous second, she let herself wonder what might happen if she stopped being so careful. Then she pushed the thought away and forced herself to sleep, because careful was safe, and safe was all she had left. Adrian didn't go back to Oleander's for 2 weeks. He told himself it was respect. Mira had drawn a line, and he wasn't the type to ignore boundaries. She'd said no. He'd accepted it. That should have been the end of it. Except it wasn't. He couldn't stop thinking about her, not in some obsessive, inappropriate way, at least he hoped not, but in the way you think about a problem you haven't solved yet, a question you can't quite answer. Mira had something his entire company had been trying to cultivate for years, something he paid consultants obscene amounts of money to teach his employees, and she did it naturally, without even realizing how rare it was. She made people feel seen. Adrian had watched it happen twice now, once with that angry customer, and once, more subtly, with him. The way she'd stopped him in the rain, the way she'd looked at him like she understood something he hadn't said out loud. That kind of empathy wasn't common. It wasn't trainable. And letting it waste away in a job that didn't appreciate it felt wrong in a way Adrian couldn't articulate. But Mira had said no. So Adrian focused on work, on Emma, on the 1,000 other things that filled his days. He sat through board meetings and investor calls. He helped Emma with her science project, a volcano that erupted with slightly too much enthusiasm and left baking soda all over the kitchen. He went on another dinner date that felt like a performance, made his excuses early, and drove home alone. And every few days he thought about sending Mira another message. He never did. Then on a rainy Tuesday that felt too much like the night they'd first met, Adrian's assistant Rachel called him with a problem. "The Westbrook presentation," she said, her voice tight with stress. "Thompson just bailed." Adrian was halfway through reviewing contracts in his home office. Emma at school, the house quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows. He set down his pen. "What do you mean, bailed?" "Food poisoning, or the flu. He wasn't clear, just said he can't do it, and the presentation is tomorrow afternoon." Adrian closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. Richard Thompson was Vail Dynamics' head of customer experience, and tomorrow's presentation to Westbrook Industries was critical. 6 months of negotiations, a potential partnership worth 8 figures, and the entire pitch hinged on demonstrating how Veil Dynamics could transform Westbrook's customer service operations. Without Thompson, they had nothing. "Who else can do it?" Adrian asked. "That's the problem. Everyone else who knows the material is already committed to the Frankfurt launch. I could try to pull someone, but no. Don't pull anyone from Frankfurt. That's too important."
"Then what do you want me to do?" Adrian thought for a moment, his mind running through options. He could do the presentation himself, but he'd been trying to step back from frontline pitches, let his team take the lead. It was part of the whole work-life balance thing his therapist kept harping on. "Let me think about it," Adrian said. "I'll call you back in an hour." He hung up and stared at the rain-streaked window, his mind already spinning.
The Westbrook presentation wasn't just about numbers and processes. It was about showing them what real customer service looked like, what empathy and action could accomplish. And suddenly, absurdly, Adrian found himself thinking about Mira again, the way she'd handled that angry customer, the way she de-escalated the situation without scripts or training, the way she'd just understood what the person needed and delivered it. That was the whole point of the presentation. That was what Veil Dynamics was trying to sell, and Mira could do it better than anyone on his payroll. Adrian picked up his phone, then set it down again. This was insane. He couldn't just call her up and ask her to help with a major business presentation. She'd said no to coffee. She clearly wasn't interested in whatever he was offering, and showing up again would just make him look desperate or worse, like he couldn't take no for an answer, but the thought wouldn't leave him alone. Finally, against every instinct telling him to let it go, Adrian picked up his phone and typed out a message. "I know you said you weren't interested, and I respect that, but I have a situation tomorrow that I think you might be uniquely qualified to help with. If you're willing to hear me out, I'd like to explain. No pressure if the answer is still no." He stared at the message for a full minute before hitting send. The response came faster than he expected. "What kind of situation?" Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. She hadn't shut him down immediately. That was something. "I have a presentation tomorrow afternoon about customer service and empathy. My lead presenter just canceled. I know this sounds strange, but after watching you work, I think you could do it better than anyone on my team." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "You want me to give a business presentation? I want you to do what you do naturally. I'll handle the business part." The dots appeared and disappeared several more times. Adrian waited, forcing himself not to send another message. Finally, when and where? Adrian exhaled and typed quickly, giving her the details. 2 o'clock tomorrow at Veil Dynamics headquarters. An hour, maybe 90 minutes. He'd pay her for her time, of course, more than she'd make in a week at Oleander's. Her response was simple. "Okay." Adrian stared at his phone, surprised. He'd expected more questions, more resistance. But Mira had just agreed. He didn't let himself think too hard about what that meant. The next afternoon, Adrian stood in the lobby of Veil Dynamics, watching the elevator numbers tick down, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. This was a terrible idea. He knew it was a terrible idea. He was bringing a waitress with 0 corporate experience into a high-stakes presentation with a potential client worth millions. His board would lose their minds if they found out. Rachel had already given him a look when he'd explained the plan. The kind of look that said, "I'm not going to argue with you, but please know I think you've lost it." Maybe he had. The elevator dinged and the doors opened. Mira stepped out, and Adrian felt his anxiety spike into something else entirely. She looked different. Not bad different, just different. She was wearing dark jeans and a simple gray sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back. No apron, no notepad. She had a small backpack over one shoulder and an expression that was trying very hard to look calm, but wasn't quite succeeding. "Hi," she said when she reached him. "Hi," Adrian said. "Thanks for coming. I'm not sure what I'm doing here." "That makes 2 of us." Mira almost smiled. "Almost." "Great, that's reassuring." Adrian gestured toward the elevator. "Come on, I'll explain upstairs." They rode up in silence, the numbers climbing steadily. Adrian could feel Mira's tension radiating off her in waves, could see the way her hands gripped the strap of her backpack a little too tightly. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Mira said automatically. Then, "No, not really. I don't know what you think I can do here, Adrian. I'm not a public speaker. I've never given a presentation in my life. You won't have to. You just said, I said I wanted you to do what you do naturally. I didn't say anything about public speaking. Mira looked at him, confused, but before she could respond, the elevator dinged and the doors opened onto the executive floor. Vail Dynamics headquarters was exactly what you'd expect from a successful tech company. Modern, clean, lots of glass and steel and open spaces designed to foster collaboration or whatever the architect had promised. Adrian led Mira through the main area, past employees who glanced up from their desks with varying degrees of curiosity, toward the conference room at the far end. Rachel was waiting outside, tablet in hand, her expression professionally neutral. They're ready for you, she said. Then to Mira, Hi, I'm Rachel. Mira said quietly. Rachel's eyes flicked to Adrian, a question in them he didn't answer. I'll let them know you're here. She disappeared into the conference room, and Adrian turned to Mira. Listen, he said, I'm going to go in there and do my part of the presentation. At some point, I'm going to tell a story about customer service. And when I do, I want you to just be yourself. Answer honestly, that's it. Answer what? You'll see. Mira looked like she wanted to argue, but Rachel reappeared before she could. They're ready. Adrian took a breath. Let's go. The conference room was dominated by a long table surrounded by leather chairs. 4 people from Westbrook Industries sat on one side, 2 men and 2 women, all in expensive suits, all with the slightly glazed expressions of people who'd sat through too many presentations that month. Adrian's team occupied the other side. Rachel, 2 VPs Adrian had pulled in for support, and now Mira, who slid into the seat beside him looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Adrian stood and launched into the presentation. He'd done this 1,000 times. The pitch was polished, the slides were clean, the data was compelling. He talked about Vail Dynamics' approach to customer experience, about the way they integrated empathy into every touchpoint, about measurable results and case studies and ROI. The Westbrook people nodded in the right places, asked the expected questions, but Adrian could see the disengagement creeping in. They'd heard versions of this pitch before, from Vail Dynamics competitors, from their own internal teams. It all sounded good on paper. It always sounded good on paper. 20 minutes in, Adrian shifted gears. Let me tell you about something that happened last week, he said, closing the slide deck. I was at a restaurant, small place, nothing fancy, and I watched one of the servers handle an angry customer who was about to turn a simple seating issue into a full-blown scene. The Westbrook people looked up, their attention sharpening slightly. Stories were always more interesting than data. The customer was furious, Adrian continued. He'd had a reservation, felt like he'd been disrespected, and he was ready to make sure everyone knew it. Most servers in that situation would either grovel or get defensive, but this server did neither. Adrian turned to Mira, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Mira, Adrian said gently, can you tell them what you did? The room went silent. Mira looked at Adrian, then at the Westbrook executives, then back at Adrian. Her face had gone pale. She started, then stopped. Just tell them what happened, Adrian said. Like you're telling a friend. Mira swallowed hard. Her hands were in her lap, her fingers twisted together. He was upset, she said finally, her voice so quiet everyone had to lean forward to hear her. About his table. He felt like we hadn't listened to what he wanted. And what did you do? Adrian prompted. I asked him what would fix it. One of the Westbrook women leaned forward slightly. That's it? Mira's eyes flicked to her. I mean, I listened first. He needed to feel heard. And then I asked what would actually make him happy because... She hesitated. Because people usually aren't mad about the thing they're saying they're mad about. They're mad because they feel dismissed or disrespected. So if you can show them you actually care about fixing it, not just making them be quiet, then what? The woman asked. Then they usually calm down, Mira said, because they feel seen. The room went quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Attentive. Engaged. Adrian watched the Westbrook executives exchange glances, something shifting in their expressions. How long have you worked in customer service? One of the men asked.
3 years, Mira said, at the restaurant. Before that? Different jobs. Retail, mostly. Ever had formal training? Mira shook her head. No, I just pay attention, I guess. The man sat back in his chair, something like approval on his face. He looked at Adrian. This is what you're talking about, this exact thing. Yes, Adrian said. Can she do it again? The woman asked. Walk us through another example? Mira looked at Adrian, panic flashing across her face, but Adrian just gave her a small nod. There was this couple, Mira said slowly, older. They came in every Friday, same table, same order. Then one Friday, the husband ordered something different, something the wife usually got, and she looked surprised. Not upset, just surprised. And? The woman prompted. And I asked if everything was okay, Mira said. Quietly, when I dropped off their drinks. The wife said her husband was having memory issues, early stages. She said some days he forgot things, and she was trying to be patient, but it was hard. Mira's voice had gotten steadier as she talked, like she was back in the restaurant instead of in a corporate conference room. I didn't make a big thing out of it, she continued. I just made sure to check on them more often. Brought extra napkins because he spilled his water. Reminded him about the dessert they always split because I could tell he'd forgotten. Little things. Why? One of the Westbrook men asked. Mira looked at him, genuinely confused by the question. Because it mattered to her. And because she paused. Because being sick is scary. And watching someone you love be sick is maybe even scarier. And if I could make one dinner a little easier, then, I don't know, that felt worth doing. The room was silent. Then the Westbrook woman who'd asked the first question smiled. Actually smiled. That's remarkable. Mira blinked. It's not. It's just paying attention. Most people don't, the woman said. That's the problem. She looked at Adrian, and Adrian could see the shift happening in real time. They'd been interested before. Now they were sold. The rest of the presentation was almost an afterthought. Adrian walked them through implementation timelines and cost structures, but everyone in the room knew the deal was done. Westbrook wasn't buying software or training programs. They were buying what Mira had just demonstrated. They were buying empathy. When the Westbrook team finally left, contracts to be drawn up, lawyers to be consulted, hands shaken all around, Adrian walked Mira back to the elevator. She hadn't said a word since the presentation ended. You okay? Adrian asked. I don't know, Mira said. She was staring at the elevator doors like they might have answers. What just happened? You helped me close a deal. By talking about customers at the restaurant? By showing them what real customer service looks like. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside. Adrian hit the button for the lobby and the doors slid closed. I meant what I said in there, Adrian said. What you do, the way you pay attention to people, the way you actually care about making things better. That's not common. Most people in customer service are just going through motions. You're actually doing it. Mira was quiet for a moment. I don't think I did anything special. That's what makes it special. The elevator reached the lobby, and they stepped out into the brightness of the afternoon. Adrian could see Mira processing, her mind clearly spinning. I should pay you, Adrian said, for your time. You don't have to. I do. This was work. You should be compensated. Mira looked at him, something complicated in her expression. Why did you really ask me here? Adrian considered the question. He could give her the easy answer, that Thompson had canceled, that he'd needed help, that it was just convenient timing. But Mira had been honest in that conference room. She deserved honesty back. Because I think you're wasting your potential at Oleander's, Adrian said. And I wanted you to see what you're capable of. You barely know me. I know enough. Mira shook her head slowly. You don't know anything. You've seen me twice. You watched me handle one angry customer and listened to me talk about an old couple. That doesn't tell you who I am. Then tell me, Adrian said. Why do you care? It was a fair question. Adrian wasn't sure he had a good answer. Because the night we met, he said finally,
You saw something in me that I'd been trying to hide. You saw that I was tired, that I was looking for something real and not finding it. And you cared enough to say something, even though it cost you, even though it was easier to just let me leave." Mira's expression softened slightly. "I think people don't do that enough," Adrian continued. "See each other, really see each other. And I think you're someone who does. And that matters." Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away. "I should go," she said quietly. "I have a shift tonight." "Okay." She started to turn, then stopped. "Adrian? Yeah? Thank you. I don't know. For thinking I could do that." "You did do it." Mira almost smiled. Then she walked away, and Adrian watched her disappear through the lobby doors and onto the street. He stood there for a minute, feeling like he'd just passed some kind of test, but wasn't entirely sure what it meant. Rachel appeared beside him, tablet in hand. "That was interesting." "Which part?" "All of it, but mostly the part where you brought a waitress to close an 8-figure deal." "She's not just a waitress." "I can see that." Rachel paused. "Are you going to offer her a job?" "I don't know," Adrian said. "Maybe." "She'd be good." "I know." Rachel studied him for a moment. "Just be careful. I know you're trying to help, but some people don't want to be saved." "I'm not trying to save anyone." "No?" Adrian didn't answer. Rachel gave him a knowing look and walked away, leaving him alone in the lobby. That night, Adrian sat in his home office long after Emma had gone to bed. He'd sent Mira payment for the day, more than generous, but not so much it felt like charity, and she'd accepted it with a simple thank you text. He kept thinking about what Rachel had said, about saving people, about whether Mira even wanted his help. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she was perfectly happy with her life the way it was. Maybe he was projecting his own loneliness onto her, seeing problems that didn't exist because it was easier than fixing his own. But then he thought about the way Mira had talked in that conference room, the way her voice had steadied when she'd told those stories, the way she'd lit up, just slightly, when the Westbrook executives had responded. She'd been good, more than good, and she'd known it, even if she didn't want to admit it. Adrian opened his laptop and started typing. An hour later, he had a proposal drafted. Nothing formal, just an outline of what a position at Veil Dynamics might look like for someone like Mira. Customer experience consultant, training development, client relations. The kind of role that would let her do what she did best without forcing her into a corporate box. He almost sent it to her. Then he saved it as a draft and closed the laptop. Not yet. Pushing her would only make her retreat further. Instead, he'd wait. Give her space. Let her come to him if and when she was ready. And hope that she would. Across town, Mira lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The day had been surreal. Standing in front of those executives, talking about customers and empathy like it was something special instead of just what you did. Watching their faces change as she spoke. Feeling, for the first time in years, like maybe she was good at something. It had been terrifying and exhilarating. And now she didn't know what to do with any of it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carlos. "Tyler said you skipped your shift. You okay?" Mira typed back. "Had something come up?" "I'm fine. See you tomorrow." She set the phone down and rolled onto her side. Adrian had paid her. A lot. More than she made in a week, just for showing up and talking for 30 minutes. It was sitting in her bank account now, and Mira kept checking the balance like it might disappear. She should be happy, should be grateful, should be thinking about how she could use that money, catch up on bills, maybe save some, treat herself to something nice for once. But all she could think about was the way the Westbrook executives had looked at her when she'd finished talking, like she'd done something that mattered, like she was someone worth listening to. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her like that. And the worst part, the truly terrifying part, was that Mira had liked it. She'd spent 3 years convincing herself that she didn't need validation, didn't need to be seen or appreciated or valued beyond her ability to refill a water glass. But today had reminded her of something she'd been trying to forget. She wanted more. Not the job necessarily, not the money or the corporate world or any of that. Just the feeling of being good at something, of mattering. Mira closed her eyes and tried to push the thought away. Wanting more was dangerous. Wanting more was how you ended up disappointed. But the thought wouldn't leave. And somewhere, in a part of herself she'd been trying to ignore, Mira wondered what would happen if, Just once, she let herself want something and actually reached for it. The thought kept her awake for hours. The morning after this presentation, Mira woke up to 17 missed calls. She stared at her phone, her heart already racing before she was fully conscious. The calls had come in between 2 and 4 a.m., all from the same number, not Adrian, someone else. There was a voicemail. Mira's hand shook as she pressed play. "Mira, it's Mom." The voice was tight, strained. "I know it's late, but I need you to call me back. It's about your brother, please, as soon as you get this." Mira sat up, the blanket falling away. Her brother, Daniel. She hadn't talked to Daniel in almost a year, hadn't talked to her mother in 6 months. The silence between them wasn't hostile exactly, just necessary. A boundary Mira had drawn after too many conversations that left her feeling scraped raw and hollow. She called back, her fingers clumsy on the screen. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Mira? What happened?" "He's okay. He's fine. It's just..." Her mother's voice cracked. "He lost his job 2 weeks ago. He didn't tell me until yesterday because he didn't want me to worry, and now he's behind on rent and his car payment, and I'm trying to help, but I can't." "Mom," Mira said quietly, "slow down." Her mother took a shaky breath. "I just thought maybe you could talk to him. You're always so good at figuring things out, and I know you two haven't been close lately, but he listens to you. He always has." Mira closed her eyes. "I don't think there's anything I can say that would help. Just try, please." The desperation in her mother's voice was familiar. The same tone she'd used 3 years ago when Mira's engagement had fallen apart, when everything had fallen apart. Just try. Just keep going. Just don't give up. As if trying harder could fix things that were fundamentally broken. "I'll call him," Mira said, because it was easier than arguing. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Her mother exhaled, relief flooding through the phone. "How are you doing? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "Are you still at that restaurant?" "Yeah." "Have you thought about looking for something else? Something with benefits, maybe? Health insurance?" "I'm fine, Mom. I just worry." "I know." They talked for a few more minutes. Surface-level updates, careful navigation around anything that might lead to deeper conversations. And then Mira hung up and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. She didn't call Daniel, not yet. She wasn't ready to hear whatever spiral he was in, wasn't ready to try to fix something she didn't have the energy to fix. Instead, she got dressed, made coffee, and tried to pretend the call hadn't rattled something loose inside her chest. She was halfway through her first cup when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Adrian. "I know this is probably too soon, but I wanted to follow up on yesterday. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I have something I'd like to discuss." Mira stared at the message, her mind still half stuck in the conversation with her mother. She should say no, should maintain the boundaries she'd tried to set, should keep her life simple and contained and safe. But the money from yesterday was sitting in her account. Real money. The kind that could help Daniel, could ease her mother's panic, could give Mira herself a buffer she hadn't had in years. And if Adrian was offering more of that, Mira typed back before she could overthink it. When? They met at a coffee shop near Powell's Books, one of those aggressively Portland places with exposed brick and baristas who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Adrian was already there when Mira arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said as she sat down, "so I got you a latte, but I can get something else if..." "It's fine," Mira said, wrapping her hands around the cup. The warmth felt good, grounding. Adrian studied her for a moment. "You okay?" "Yeah, just a long morning." He didn't push, which Mira appreciated. Instead, he pulled out a folder and set it on the table between them. "I want to be straight with you," Adrian said. "I think you could do a lot more than serve tables, and I think Veil Dynamics could use someone like you." Mira looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. "What does that mean?" "It means I'd like to offer you a position. Customer experience consultant. You'd work with our training team, help develop programs, maybe sit in on some client meetings. Nothing you'd need a degree for. Just what you already know how to do." Mira's throat tightened. "Adrian, the pay would be $60,000 to start," Adrian continued. "With benefits, health insurance, dental, the whole thing. It's part-time to start, 20 hours a week, so you could keep your job at the restaurant if you wanted. Or not? 60,000, part-time. Mira's brain stuttered over the number. That was more than she made in a year at Oleander's. For 20 hours a week. Why? She asked. Because you're good at something we need. You don't know that. You've seen me twice.
3 times, and yeah, I do know that. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Mira, I've spent 15 years building this company. I've hired hundreds of people, and most of them are smart, capable, credentialed, but very few of them can do what you did yesterday. Very few of them actually care about the people they're serving. That doesn't mean I can do a corporate job. Why not? Mira opened her mouth, then closed it, because she didn't have a good answer.
Or rather, she had too many answers, all of them tangled up in fear and old failures and the certainty that people like her didn't get opportunities like this. I don't have experience, she said finally. You have 3 years of customer service experience. At a restaurant. Experience is experience. It's not the same. It's more relevant than you think. Adrian paused. Look, I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to do what you already do, just in a different context. That's it. Mira looked down at the folder. She could see papers inside, official-looking documents with Veil Dynamics letterhead. What if I'm bad at it? She asked quietly. Then we'll figure it out. But I don't think you will be. You barely know me. I know enough. Mira shook her head slowly. You keep saying that, but you don't. You don't know why I work at Oleander's. You don't know why I'm not looking for something better. You don't know anything about me except what you've seen in a couple of random encounters. So tell me, Adrian said. Mira looked at him, and something cracked inside her chest. Maybe it was the phone call with her mother. Maybe it was the exhaustion of holding everything together for so long. Maybe it was just the way Adrian was looking at her, patient, steady, like he had all the time in the world. 3 years ago, Mira said, her voice low, I had a plan. I was engaged. I was applying for real jobs, the kind with career paths and everything. I had final interviews with 2 different companies. I thought I was finally going to build something. She paused, her fingers tightening around the coffee cup. And then everything fell apart in the same week. Both job offers evaporated. Budget cuts, they said, but I think they just found better candidates. My fiancé ended things. Not because of a fight or anything dramatic. He just decided we wanted different things, and I realized I didn't actually know what I wanted. I'd been trying so hard to become what everyone expected me to be that I'd lost track of who I actually was. Adrian didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just listened. So I stopped trying, Mira continued. I took the job at Oleander's because it was easy and it didn't ask anything of me. I moved into a cheap apartment. I kept my head down. And I learned that the safest way to live was to stop hoping for more. She looked up, meeting Adrian's eyes. That's who I am, she said. I'm not some undiscovered talent waiting for the right opportunity. I'm someone who tried and failed and decided it was easier not to try again. So when you look at me and see potential, I think you're seeing something that isn't there. The coffee shop noise filled the silence between them. The hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations, the scrape of chairs on hardwood. Finally, Adrian spoke. I don't think you stopped trying, he said. I think you just redirected where you put your energy. You still show up every day. You still care about doing your job well. You still pay attention to people in a way most people don't. That's not giving up. That's just surviving. Mira felt her eyes burn. She looked away. But surviving isn't the same as living, Adrian continued quietly. And I think maybe you're ready to try living again, even if it's scary. What if I'm not? Then you say no, and we both move on. But I don't think that's what you want. Mira's phone buzzed in her pocket. Probably her mother, calling to check if she'd talked to Daniel yet. Probably another crisis that needed managing, another problem that needed fixing. She thought about the money in her account from yesterday. Thought about her brother losing his job. Thought about her mother's desperate voice on the phone. Thought about her own bills, her own future, her own barely acknowledged desire for something more than just getting by. And she thought about standing in that conference room, talking to those executives, feeling, just for a moment, like she mattered. Can I think about it? Mira asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. How much time is that? Adrian smiled slightly. However much you need. Mira picked up the folder. Inside were documents outlining the position, the salary, the benefits. Everything official and real and terrifying. I should go, she said, standing. I have a shift this afternoon. Okay. She started to leave, then turned back. Adrian? Yeah? Why are you doing this? Really? Adrian was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Because the night we met, he said finally, you saw me. Really saw me. And that's rare. And I think people who can do that, who can really see other people, deserve to be seen too, even if they're trying to hide. Mira felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, not quite trust. Something in between. She nodded once, then walked out of the coffee shop into the gray Portland morning. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Mira went through her shift at Oleander's on autopilot, refilling drinks and taking orders and smiling at customers while her mind spun in circles. The folder sat in her backpack in the employee area, a physical weight she could feel even when she wasn't looking at it. Carlos noticed immediately. You're somewhere else today, he said during a lull, leaning through the kitchen window. I'm fine. That's what you always say. He paused. Does this have anything to do with that guy, the one who came back? Mira looked up sharply. How did you... Tyler talks. You know this. It's not... Mira stopped, then sighed. He offered me a job. Carlos's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? Yeah. Doing what? Customer service stuff. At his company. And I don't know what to do. Carlos studied her for a long moment. You want my opinion? Not really. I'm going to give it anyway. He crossed his arms, his expression unusually serious. You're good at this job, Mira. You're probably the best server we have. But you're also miserable. I'm not. You are. You've been miserable since the day you started. You just hide it well. Carlos leaned forward. Look, I get it. Safe is comfortable. Safe doesn't hurt, but safe also doesn't go anywhere. And I think you deserve to go somewhere. Mira felt her throat tighten. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you figure out what's next. But at least you'll have tried. That's easy for you to say. It's really not. Carlos's voice softened. You think I wanted to work in a restaurant kitchen my whole life? I applied to culinary school 3 times before I got in. Failed out twice. Came back here each time because it was safe and familiar, and I knew I could do it without thinking. But you know what? I'm going back again next semester, because I'd rather fail trying than succeed at something that doesn't matter. Mira stared at him, surprised. She'd worked with Carlos for 3 years and never knew any of this. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Because you never asked. You keep yourself pretty locked down, Mira. Hard to talk to someone who's always 3 steps back from every conversation. It was true, and Mira knew it. She'd spent so long keeping people at arm's length that she'd forgotten how to let them in. I'm scared, she said quietly. I know, but maybe being scared means it matters. The shift ended at 9. Mira clocked out, grabbed her backpack, and walked home through streets slick with rain. When she got to her apartment, she pulled out the folder and spread the documents across her kitchen table. Job description, salary breakdown, benefits package. Everything laid out in clean, professional language. It looked real. It looked possible. It looked terrifying. Mira picked up her phone and finally called Daniel. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice rough. Hey, Mom called me, Mira said. She said you lost your job. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? Because we haven't exactly been talking. We could have been. Could we? Daniel's voice had an edge to it. You made it pretty clear you needed space. I was trying to respect that. Mira closed her eyes. He was right. She had pulled away. From him, from their mother, from everyone. Because it was easier than explaining why she couldn't be what they needed her to be. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For disappearing. Daniel exhaled slowly. You didn't disappear. You just checked out. And I get it. I do. After everything with Jake and the job stuff, you needed to protect yourself. But you're my sister. I missed you. Mira felt tears prick her eyes. I missed you too. Then why didn't you call? Because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to be around you without feeling like I was failing at everything. Mira, you never failed at anything. You just hit a rough patch. That's not the same thing. It felt the same. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, are you okay? Like, really okay? I don't know, Mira said honestly. Someone offered me a job, a real job, and I don't know if I should take it. Why wouldn't you? Because I'm scared I'll screw it up. So, screw it up. At least you'll have tried. Mira laughed despite herself. Carlos said basically the same thing. Then maybe you should listen. Daniel paused. What's the worst that could happen? I fail. Again. Okay. And then what? Mira thought about it, really thought about it. I guess I'd go back to what I'm doing now. So you'd be exactly where you are right now, except you'd know you tried. That doesn't sound so bad. It didn't. When Daniel put it like that, it really didn't. They talked for another 20 minutes about his job search, about their mother, about nothing important and everything important. By the time they hung up, Mira felt something loosen in her chest. Not resolution exactly, but possibility. She looked at the documents spread across her table. Then she picked up her phone and typed a message to Adrian. I want to try. I don't know if I'll be good at it, but I want to try. The response came almost immediately. That's all I'm asking. When can you start? Mira stared at the message, her heart pounding. Next week? Perfect. I'll have Rachel send over the paperwork. Mira set her phone down and looked around her apartment. The same small space she'd lived in for 3 years. The same furniture, the same walls, the same carefully constructed safety. Except now, maybe, there was a door opening. And for the first time in a long time, Mira thought she might actually walk through it. The next week was chaos. Mira gave her notice at Oleander's, 2 weeks, out of respect for the manager who'd hired her when she'd needed it most. She filled out paperwork for Vail Dynamics. She had a physical for the health insurance. She met with Rachel, who walked her through onboarding with the kind of efficient kindness that made Mira think maybe corporate life wouldn't be completely terrible. And she tried very hard not to panic. Adrian kept his distance, which Mira appreciated. He sent occasional texts, checking in, offering support, making sure she had everything she needed, but he didn't push, didn't hover. Just let her figure things out at her own pace. On her last day at Oleander's, Carlos made her a cake. It was lopsided and the frosting was uneven, but it said, "Good luck," in slightly crooked letters, and Mira cried when she saw it. You better not forget us when you're some fancy consultant, Tyler said, half joking. I'm not going to be fancy anything, Mira said. I'm just going to be the same person in a different building. Still, you're moving up. That's cool. It was cool. Terrifying, but cool. Mira's first day at Vail Dynamics was a Monday in late October. She showed up 15 minutes early, wearing pants she'd bought specifically for this job and a sweater that she hoped looked professional without trying too hard. Her stomach was in knots, her palms were sweating, and she'd already mentally rehearsed quitting at least 5 times. Rachel met her in the lobby. Ready? Rachel asked. Not even a little bit, Mira said. Rachel smiled. Good. If you weren't nervous, I'd be worried. She gestured toward the elevator. Come on, I'll show you around. The next few hours were a blur of introductions and orientations. Mira met her team, 3 other people in customer experience, all of whom seemed competent and vaguely intimidating. She got her desk, her computer login, her employee handbook. She sat through an HR presentation about benefits and policies and company culture. And through all of it, a voice in her head kept whispering, You don't belong here. They're going to figure out you don't belong here. Adrian appeared around noon, poking his head into the training room where Mira was learning the company's customer database system. How's it going? He asked. Overwhelming, Mira said, honestly. That's normal. First days are always overwhelming. He paused. You doing okay? Ask me in a week. Adrian smiled. Fair enough. Listen, don't feel like you have to absorb everything at once. Just take it one thing at a time. That's what Rachel said. Rachel's smart. You should listen to her. He left, and Mira went back to the database training, trying to focus on the screen in front of her instead of the spiraling anxiety in her chest. The first week was hard, harder than Mira had expected. The work itself wasn't complicated. She was mostly shadowing other team members, learning systems, sitting in on calls. But the environment was so different from anything she was used to. Everything was scheduled and structured. People had titles and hierarchies. There were meetings about meetings, and everyone spoke in acronyms Mira didn't understand. She felt lost, out of place, like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But she also felt something else. During her second week, Mira sat in on a training session where a Veil Dynamics instructor was teaching new customer service reps how to handle difficult customers. The instructor was following a script: acknowledge, empathize, solve, and the reps were practicing with role-play scenarios. It was fine, competent, but it was also hollow. Mira watched a rep stumble through a scenario about an angry customer whose order was delayed, reciting the script with all the warmth of an automated response. The instructor corrected her technique, adjusted her phrasing, made her try again. "Can I ask something?" Mira said before she could stop herself. The instructor looked up. "Sure. Why are we teaching them what to say instead of teaching them how to listen?" The room went quiet. "What do you mean?" the instructor asked. "I mean, the script is fine, but it doesn't actually address why the customer is upset. It's just words. If you don't listen to what they actually need, the words don't matter." The instructor frowned slightly. "The script is designed to cover the most common scenarios." "But people aren't scenarios," Mira said. She could feel everyone looking at her, could feel her face getting hot, but she kept going. "They're people, and they're usually not upset about the thing they're saying they're upset about. They're upset because they feel dismissed or disrespected or ignored. So if you just follow a script without actually hearing them..." She trailed off, suddenly aware she'd overstepped. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to say..." "No," the instructor said slowly. Actually, that's a good point." He looked at the reps. "What do you all think? Does the script feel authentic when you're using it?" One of the reps, a young woman who looked fresh out of college, raised her hand tentatively. "Honestly, it feels kind of fake, like I'm reading lines instead of having a conversation." "Same," another rep agreed. The instructor looked at Mira. "What would you teach them instead?" Mira's heart was pounding. "I'd teach them to ask questions. Real questions. Not from a list, but from actual curiosity. Because if you're curious about why someone is upset, they can tell. And if they can tell you actually care, they'll usually work with you instead of against you." The instructor nodded slowly. "Could you demonstrate?" What? Could you show us, role-play a scenario with one of the reps?" Mira looked at the faces around the table. They were waiting, interested. "Okay," she said quietly. The next 20 minutes were some of the most intense of Mira's life. She walked the reps through a scenario: an angry customer, a delayed shipment, mounting frustration. And instead of giving them a script, she showed them how to listen, how to ask follow-up questions, how to reflect back what they were hearing, how to make someone feel seen instead of managed. And the reps got it. She could see it click into place, could see them relax into actual conversations instead of performance. When the session ended, the instructor pulled Mira aside. "That was remarkable," he said. "Where did you learn that?" "I didn't learn it anywhere. That's how I've always done it." "We should incorporate this into the training. Would you be willing to help develop it?" Mira stared at him. "I've been here 2 weeks." "So, you clearly know what you're doing." And just like that, Mira's job changed. Over the next month, she worked with the training team to rebuild their customer service curriculum. She sat in on more sessions, offered feedback, developed exercises. She was nervous the entire time, convinced she'd say something stupid, do something wrong, expose herself as a fraud. But nobody seemed to notice. Instead, people listened to her, valued her input, asked for her opinion. It was strange, disorienting. And slowly, carefully, Mira started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she actually belonged here. Adrian watched from a distance, careful not to hover but unable to look away completely. He saw Mira transform over those first few weeks, saw her confidence grow, saw her start to trust herself again. And he saw something else too, something he hadn't expected. He cared about her, not just as an employee, not just as someone with potential, as a person, as someone who'd seen him when nobody else had, who'd reminded him what honesty looked like. It complicated things. Made him second-guess every interaction, every text, every decision, because the last thing Mira needed was someone with power over her job making things complicated. So Adrian kept his distance, kept things professional, and tried not to think about the way his chest tightened every time she smiled. It was fine. It was professional. It was absolute torture. But it was the right thing to do. At least, that's what he told himself. 3 months into her new job, Mira ran into Victoria Chen in the lobby of Veil Dynamics. She didn't recognize her at first. The woman was standing near the reception desk, perfectly dressed in a navy suit, talking on her phone with the kind of practiced charm that felt like performance art. But something about her voice caught Mira's attention, that polished, slightly hollow quality that reminded her of nails on glass. Then the woman turned and Mira saw her face. It was the woman from that first night, the one who'd sat across from Adrian, treating dinner like an audition. Victoria's eyes swept past Mira without recognition, which didn't surprise her. Mira had been invisible that night, just background noise in whatever calculation Victoria had been running. But Mira remembered her. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked Victoria. "I'm here to see Adrian Vale," Victoria said, her voice bright. "I have a meeting at 2. The receptionist checked her computer, frowned slightly. "I don't see anything scheduled." "Really? That's strange. He reached out last week about a potential consulting opportunity." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but something sharp entered her eyes. "Could you check again?" Mira walked past them toward the elevator, her mind spinning. Adrian hadn't mentioned anything about Victoria. Hadn't mentioned anyone, actually. He'd been scarce lately, polite when they crossed paths, supportive when she needed help, but distant. Professional. It shouldn't bother her. It didn't bother her. Except it did. Mira stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor, trying to ignore the uncomfortable twist in her stomach. It wasn't her business who Adrian met with. Wasn't her business if he was seeing someone. They weren't friends. Barely colleagues, really. He'd given her a job and she was doing it. That was the extent of their relationship. The elevator doors started to close. "Hold the elevator." Mira stuck her hand out reflexively, and the doors bounced open. Victoria stepped in, still on her phone. "No, I understand," Victoria was saying, "but I think if we position it as a strategic partnership rather than a service contract, the optics are much better." She paused. "Exactly. I'll send you the revised proposal tonight." She hung up and finally looked at Mira properly. Her gaze was assessing the way you'd look at furniture you were considering buying. "What floor?" Victoria asked. 3. Victoria pressed 4, then settled back, checking her reflection in the polished elevator wall. She adjusted a strand of hair, reapplied her lipstick with quick, efficient movements. "Do you work here?" Victoria asked, not really looking at Mira. "Yeah." "How long?" 3 months. "How do you like it?" Mira considered lying, giving some neutral corporate response. But something about Victoria's tone, that practiced interest that didn't actually care about the answer, made her honest. "It's good," Mira said. "Better than I expected." Victoria glanced at her then, actually seeing her for the first time. "Have we met before?" "I don't think so." "You look familiar." The elevator reached the 3rd floor. Mira stepped out, relieved. "Good luck with your meeting." The doors closed before Victoria could respond. Mira walked to her desk, dropped her bag, and tried to focus on the training module she was supposed to review. But her mind kept drifting back to Victoria standing in the lobby, confident and polished, and completely at ease in a world Mira was still learning to navigate. She wondered what Adrian saw in her, wondered if he'd reached out or if Victoria had, wondered why she cared. "You look stressed." Mira looked up. Rachel stood beside her desk, tablet in hand, her expression concerned. "I'm fine," Mira said automatically. "That's what you always say." Rachel pulled up a chair. "What's going on?" "Nothing, just tired." Rachel studied her for a moment, then glanced toward Adrian's office at the far end of the floor. "Did something happen?" "No. Why would something happen?" "Because you keep looking at his office like it personally offended you." Mira forced herself to look at her computer screen instead. "I saw someone downstairs. Victoria Chen. She said she had a meeting with Adrian." Rachel's expression shifted. "Did she?" "You know her?" "Unfortunately." Rachel's voice was carefully neutral. "She's been trying to get Adrian's attention for months.
Calls the office, sends proposals, shows up at events. He's been polite but not interested. She said he reached out, Rachel snorted. I handle Adrian's schedule. He didn't reach out. Mira felt something loosen in her chest. So she just showed up? Wouldn't be the first time. Rachel stood, brushing imaginary lint off her skirt. Don't worry about it. Adrian's good at handling people who waste his time. She walked away, and Mira tried to go back to work. But 20 minutes later, she saw Victoria walk past the elevators, her expression tight, her phone already at her ear. She didn't look like someone who'd had a successful meeting. Mira told herself she wasn't relieved. She absolutely was. That evening, just as Mira was packing up to leave, her computer pinged with a message. Adrian, do you have a minute? Mira's heart jumped. She typed back, sure. Adrian, my office? Mira grabbed her notebook, more for something to do with her hands than because she needed it, and walked to Adrian's office. The door was open. He was sitting at his desk, looking tired in a way she recognized. The kind of tired that came from dealing with people who took more energy than they gave. Hey, she said from the doorway. Adrian looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion fading slightly. Come in, he said. Close the door. Mira did, her stomach fluttering nervously. Is everything okay? Yeah, I just wanted to check in, see how things are going. They're good. The training revision is almost done, and the team seems happy with it. I heard. Rachel says you're doing great work. Rachel's generous. Rachel doesn't do generous. She does honest. Adrian leaned back in his chair. How are you doing? Really? Mira sat down in the chair across from his desk. Honestly, I'm still waiting for someone to figure out I don't belong here. You belong here. You have to say that. You hired me. I say it because it's true. Adrian paused. You've made more impact in 3 months than some people make in 3 years. The way you rebuilt that training program, that's going to change how we do business. That matters. Mira looked down at her hands. I just did what made sense. Exactly. Most people overthink it. You just do what makes sense. He was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you regret it, taking this job? Mira looked up, surprised. No. Why would I regret it? Because I pushed you into it. And I've been thinking maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe you were happy where you were, and I disrupted that because I thought I knew better. You didn't push me. You offered. I chose. Did you? Or did you feel obligated because I kept showing up? Mira considered the question. It was fair. She had felt pressured, at least initially, felt like Adrian was offering something she'd be stupid to refuse, even if she wasn't sure she wanted it. But that wasn't the whole truth. I was scared, Mira said slowly. And yeah, maybe I felt some pressure, but I also wanted to try. I'd just forgotten how to want things. You reminded me. Adrian's expression softened. I saw Victoria downstairs earlier. So that's what this was about. She said you had a meeting, Mira said carefully. I didn't. She made an appointment with reception, told them I'd requested it. I gave her 10 minutes out of politeness, then asked her to leave. You don't have to explain. I know, but I wanted to. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. She's been persistent. I've tried to be clear that I'm not interested, but she doesn't take hints well. Today she suggested a partnership between her firm and Veil Dynamics. When I declined, she asked if we could discuss it over dinner. What did you say? I said no. Adrian met her eyes. I'm not interested in Victoria. I never was. Mira's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. Okay. Okay? It's your life, Adrian. You don't owe me explanations. I know. But after everything, after asking you to trust me, to take a risk, I wanted you to know I'm not the kind of person who plays games with anyone. There was something in his voice that made Mira think they weren't just talking about Victoria anymore. I know you're not, she said quietly. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Mira felt the air in the room change, felt something shift that had been shifting for months, slowly, carefully, both of them pretending not to notice. I should go, Mira said, standing. Emma's probably waiting for you. Adrian stood too. Actually, she's at a friend's house tonight, sleepover. Oh, another pause. Another moment where neither of them moved. Mira, Adrian said. Yeah? Would you want to get dinner sometime? Not for work. Just dinner. Mira's breath caught. Like a date? If that's something you'd be interested in. If not, we can forget I asked. Mira thought about all the reasons she should say no. The power dynamic. The fact that Adrian was her boss. The way her last relationship had imploded and left her gun-shy about trying again. The very real possibility that this could get messy and complicated and ruin the good thing she'd finally built. She thought about all of it. Then she said, breakfast would be better. Adrian blinked. Breakfast? Dinner feels like too much pressure. Breakfast is casual, lower stakes. A smile spread across Adrian's face, genuine and warm. Breakfast works. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. Mira felt herself smile back. Okay then. She walked to the door, her heart racing. Then she turned back. Adrian? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. You never gave up, Adrian said. You were just waiting for the right moment. Mira left his office feeling lighter than she had in years. The next morning, Mira met Adrian at a diner near the river. It was the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint, and it was perfect. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people sharing a meal. Adrian was already there when she arrived, sitting in a booth by the window. He stood when he saw her, and there was something nervous in the gesture that made Mira relax. He was as uncertain about this as she was. Hey, he said. Hey. They sat, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then they both started talking at the same time. How's Emma? Did you sleep? They stopped, laughed. You first, Adrian said. I was just going to ask how Emma is. She's good. Excited about her school play next week. She's playing a tree. A tree? A very enthusiastic tree, apparently. Adrian smiled. She wants me to invite people. I think she's nervous no one will show up. I'll come, Mira said before she could think about it. Adrian looked surprised. You don't have to. I want to, if that's okay. Yeah. She'd love that. The waitress appeared, poured coffee, took their orders. When she left, Adrian leaned back in the booth. Can I ask you something? He said. Sure. That night at the restaurant, when you stopped me in the rain, what made you do it? Mira wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, thinking. I saw something in you that I recognized. This exhaustion, this sense that you were going through the motions but not actually living. And I couldn't watch you leave without saying something. Why did you care? Because I was doing the same thing, and I knew how lonely it was. She looked up. I think I was talking to myself as much as I was talking to you. Adrian nodded slowly. I thought about you for weeks after that night. Couldn't figure out why a 30-second conversation with a stranger had stayed with me more than relationships I'd had for months. And now? Now I think it's because you were the first person in a long time who saw me instead of what I could do for them. Mira understood that. Understood it completely. Their food arrived, and they ate and talked about nothing important. Emma's tree costume, Mira's brother's new job, the rain that never seemed to stop in Portland. Easy conversation. The kind that felt natural instead of forced. Can I tell you something? Mira said as they were finishing up. Of course. I almost didn't come today. I was up at 5 a.m. talking myself out of it. What changed your mind? I realized I've spent 3 years making the safe choice. And safe hasn't made me happy. It's just made me safe. And you want more than safe? I think I do. I'm just not sure how to do that without falling apart again. Adrian reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. What if you didn't have to do it alone? Mira looked at his hand, then at his face. She saw the same uncertainty she felt, the same fear of trying and failing, the same hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. She reached out and closed the distance between their hands. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, let's try not doing it alone. Adrian's smile was worth every anxious moment that had led to this. They left the diner as the rain started up again, soft and steady. Adrian walked her to her car, and they stood there for a moment, neither wanting to leave. So, Adrian said,
This was a good start. It was. Can we do it again? I'd like that. Adrian hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her cheek. Brief, gentle, a promise more than anything else. I'll see you Monday, he said. See you Monday. Mira drove home with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She felt terrified and exhilarated and cautiously, carefully hopeful. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was perfect. But it was honest, and after years of settling for performances and pretense, honest felt like everything. Over the next few weeks, Mira and Adrian fell into a rhythm. Breakfast twice a week. Dinners when Emma was with friends. Long conversations that stretched late into the night, the kind where you forget to check the time because you're too busy actually talking. They took it slow. Both of them had been burned before. Both of them carried scars they weren't ready to expose completely. But slowly, carefully, they let each other in. Mira met Emma officially at the school play, watched her daughter throw herself into the role of Tree with an enthusiasm that made the entire audience smile. Afterward, Emma ran up to Adrian with leaves falling out of her costume. "Did you see me?" she demanded. "You were incredible," Adrian said, scooping her up. Emma looked at Mira. "Did you like it?" "Best tree I've ever seen," Mira said seriously. Emma beamed. "Dad says you work with him." "I do." "Are you his girlfriend?" "Emma," Adrian said, his face going slightly red, but Emma just looked at Mira, waiting for an answer. "I'm his friend," Mira said. "Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this. "Are you nice?" "I try to be." "Do you like pizza?" "Love it." "Then it's okay." Emma wiggled out of Adrian's arms and ran off to find her friends, leaving the adults staring after her. "Sorry," Adrian said. "She's direct." "I like direct," Mira said. And she meant it. Meanwhile, Victoria Chen's world was quietly unraveling. It started small. A client who suddenly went with a competitor. A networking event where people seemed less interested in her pitch. A proposal that didn't get the response she expected. Then bigger things. A major contract fell through. A partnership dissolved. People who used to return her calls stopped answering. It wasn't dramatic. No public scandal or obvious failure. Just a slow, steady erosion as people began to recognize the difference between strategy and sincerity. Between someone who was genuinely interested and someone who was just calculating value. Victoria noticed, of course. She wasn't stupid, but she told herself it was temporary. A rough patch. Everyone had rough patches, except it didn't stop. And one day, sitting in her apartment with a bottle of wine and a phone that hadn't rung in 2 days, Victoria pulled up Adrian's number. She stared at it for a long time. Then she deleted it. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed. 4 months after that first breakfast, Mira stood in Adrian's kitchen, helping Emma make cookies. The kitchen was a disaster. Flour everywhere, chocolate chips scattered across the counter, Emma's hands covered in dough. "You're supposed to put the chips in the cookies, not eat them," Mira said, trying not to laugh. "But they're better this way," Emma protested through a mouthful of chocolate. Adrian walked in from the living room, took one look at the chaos, and grinned. "Should I be concerned?" "Probably," Mira said. Emma held up a misshapen blob of dough. "Look what we made!" "That's creative." "It's a dinosaur." "Obviously." Adrian caught Mira's eye over Emma's head, and something passed between them. Something warm and real and completely unexpected. This wasn't what Mira had imagined when she'd stopped Adrian in the rain that night. Wasn't what Adrian had been looking for when he'd walked into Oleander's. But it was what they'd found. Later that night, after Emma was in bed and the kitchen was mostly cleaned, Mira and Adrian sat on his back porch watching the rain. "I need to tell you something," Adrian said. Mira's stomach tightened. "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you, and I know that's probably too soon to say, and I don't want to scare you off, but I also don't want to pretend I don't feel it." Mira was quiet for a long moment, her heart pounding. "I'm scared," she said finally. "I know. I'm scared I'll mess this up, that I'll fall apart again and take you down with me." "You won't." "You don't know that." "You're right, I don't. But I know that you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. And I know that whatever happens, I want to be here for it." Mira felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm falling in love with you too.
And it terrifies me. Adrian reached for her hand. Then let's be terrified together. Mira laughed, wiping at her eyes. That's a terrible plan. Probably, but it's honest. Yeah, Mira said softly. It is. They sat there in the rain, hands linked, two people who'd learned to expect disappointment finally choosing something different, choosing hope, choosing each other. 6 months later, on a rainy Tuesday that felt like the echo of the night they'd met, Adrian walked into Oleander's. The place looked exactly the same. Same tables, same lighting, same smell of coffee and bread. Carlos was still in the kitchen. Tyler was still charming customers. Nothing had changed, except everything had. Adrian sat at table 7, the same table where Victoria had sat across from him and treated dinner like a transaction. The same table where Mira had first spoken to him, her voice trembling but honest. Mira slid into the seat across from him, out of uniform now, just visiting. She'd quit Oleander's 2 months ago to work at Veil Dynamics full-time, but she still came back sometimes, to see Carlos, to remember where she'd started. You're late, she said. Traffic. Liar. You were rehearsing. Adrian smiled. He'd been rehearsing. All week, actually. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. Mira picked it up, unfolded it. Breakfast tomorrow. If you'd like a first date that starts honestly. She looked up, confused. We've already had a first date. I know, but I wanted to give you this anyway. The thing I should have given you that first night. Adrian, we've been dating for 6 months. What are you... I'm asking if you want to keep doing this. Officially. No more taking it slow, no more being careful. Just us. Together, for real. Mira stared at him, her eyes bright. Is this a proposal? She asked. No, that comes later. This is me asking if you're ready to stop being scared and start being happy. Mira laughed, tears spilling over. That's not fair. You can't just, I can, and I am. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. So what do you say? Breakfast tomorrow. And the day after that? And the day after that? Mira looked at their joined hands, at his face, at the future spreading out before them, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. Breakfast sounds nice, she said, her voice soft and steady and sure. Outside, the rain continued to fall, patient, steady, unchanged. But inside, two people who'd learned to expect disappointment finally let themselves believe in something better. Not perfection. Not some fairy tale ending where everything magically fell into place. Just two imperfect people choosing honesty over safety. Choosing each other over fear. Choosing to build something real, even if it was messy and uncertain and required them to be braver than they thought they could be. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.